Welcome, folks, to this first edition of Tech Sales Advice for the new year. I realize it's February 5th, so I probably am too late in saying Happy New Year to any of you who may be catching this. But nonetheless, since this is my first show of the new year, I am going to say Happy New Year. I'm excited for today's guest. Allow me to remind you, these are live conversations, folks. And as I like to say, these conversations are by design, unscripted, unrehearsed, and unpredictable. Today's guest joins from, I believe, just outside of New York City in a small town in New Jersey. His name is Ryan Lavallee. He is a VP of Solution Engineering with Salesforce, and he is responsible for the manufacturing, automotive, and energy industries. And we're going to talk today about the changing landscape of pre-sales, the changing landscape in sales in general, and how to handle and manage that as both an individual contributor and as a manager. Ryan, welcome, my friend. It's great to see you. You and I have connected a few times, and here we are chatting. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing so well, Chris, and thank you so much for having me. This is great. I'm super excited to dive into this topic with you. Having been in the technology industry for over 20 years and seen a lot of change, I think this is just a great discussion to have right now because we're in the middle of such a big paradigm shift, and we've seen paradigm shifts before, but this one's a little different, a little bit unique, just because of the velocity. So, really excited for today's conversation.
Well, excited to have you. By the way, I know you mentioned that the medals behind you there are races and marathons that you've won and placed in. Am I correct about that?
Well, they're from a lot of races. I don't know about one and placed in too many. That would be a very, very small subset. But yes, you're absolutely right, Chris. I am a runner. It is my hobby, passion. It's the way that I relieve stress. And I have a little collection behind me, everything from the local turkey trot 5K to a 108 24-hour ultra. So I've run the gamut. It's a great sport, a great pastime.
Impressive. Yeah, it's I have to say it's an impressive display. So by the way, Ryan, I already see a couple people chiming in. Mike and Jack say hello. Folks, if you do care to say hello, please do so. We don't see who's out there, so would love to see your name pop up in the chat. And by all means, if you have any questions for Ryan or myself, please feel free to ask. Ryan, you mentioned that you've been in technology for 20 plus years. I think it's interesting to hear people's story as to how they got into pre-sales to begin with. Do you mind just giving a little bit more of your background and, how did you end up here at this point in your career?
I owe my beginnings in pre-sales to a very consultative recruiter, believe it or not. So when I left school, graduated from Babson College, I got a job at a software company called BBN in Cambridge, which was recently acquired by GTE. And I was working as a business analyst and helping to roll out enterprise software. And decided that I wanted to do something different, but I wasn't really sure what. I wanted to be in more of a, some kind of a field where I could interact with customers and be more of the tip of the spear of an organization. So I met with a recruiter and he interviewed me and asked me some questions. And he said, just based on our short meeting, I think you would be really good at pre-sales. And I said, that's what I want to do. What is that?
What's pre-sales?
And, he explained it to me, and that it's a lot of understanding technology and being able to explain that and translating technology into how a solution meets business requirements. So there's a sales aspect of it, there's an engineering aspect of it, and you seem to be passionate about both, and you seem like you enjoy being in front of people. And I said, absolutely, that I'd be really interested. So from there, I was placed at a relatively small startup company, and this was right around 2000. So a great time to be at a small fledgling startup company. Let me tell you that.
Yeah.
It was an interesting ride. I learned an awful lot, but a fantastic. Just immediately knew that this is what I wanted to do with my career, and had an opportunity to carry a bag for a while. Went to another software company called OpenText. And when I joined OpenText, we were about $100 million company. And I stayed there for about 5 years, and we were about a $600 million company when I left. So got some exposure to just what it's like to manage through growth, to lead through change. And thrilled to say the last 17 years have been with Salesforce, which
Amazing.
has been, an amazing ride, tremendous explosive growth, lots of change, and just a fantastic journey.
Yeah, incredible. And you found what I consider to be the best job in tech relatively early in your career. And from the sounds of it, you knew almost instantly this was the profession for me. And I think so many of us, when we sort of finally find the profession, when it fits, right?
It's like the old saying, you don't know what you got till it's gone. And when I really ultimately knew, like, this is what I want to do, it was actually after I'd been in pre-sales for a little over a year. I had an opportunity to pick up a quota, and I became a district sales manager. And I did that for a year. And while it is wonderful to kind of lead the team and drive initiatives and own the customer relationship, it was during that year when I realized there is so much that I just miss. And I knew that, this is where I want to be. This is what I want to be doing. It goes back to my values. And ultimately that's where I've spent the balance of my career since then.
Amen. I love that. Let me just quickly say hello to a few friends. Shannon DeCarmo, nice to see you. She's actually she's someone that lives here in my neck of the woods, and it sounds like she's passing through Jersey. Shannon, great to see you. Jason Gast highly recommends doing a Run Disney event. Have you done one of those Run Disney events, right?
I don't know if the resolution is good enough, but there are a bunch of Run Disney medals behind me. Just amazing races, wonderful, inclusive of all different skills of runners. So you can actually go with friends or you bring your family. I agree with 100%. Wonderful events, would highly recommend.
Awesome. So let's dive into the topic. You mentioned that, and I think we all see it, and largely because of AI and what's just changing in the technology landscape, and coming out of obviously COVID, which is now quite a few years old, but still I think that forever changed the way we manage teams, the way we engage with prospects and customers. What are you seeing in terms of some of the most significant impacts of some of the changes that are happening, Ryan?
Well, change impacts people in a lot of different ways, but I think that what I've observed over time is I've seen a pattern when it comes to change. And years ago, you can imagine, being at a company for a long time, like me at Salesforce that's grown, we've seen a lot of change, most of it growth, which has been great. But early on, one of my leaders brought in a behavioral scientist to speak to us about change management and about the psychology that of our teams and what people were going through as this changes were taking place. And I found it really, really interesting, and I hung on to it all these years, is that even though different changes are going to impact people differently based on what their needs are, what their values are. The human response to change is initially, usually a positive one, like, oh, different excitement, or it might be a little bit of denial, like, wow, this is really okay, but kind of an uptick in energy. And then it's a pretty quick descent downwards into kind of frustration and a little bit of depression, because all the negative thoughts about what this change is going to bring about become real. Yeah. And that could, depending on the type of change that we're talking about, or how big an impact it's going to have, that could take a long time. It can be or it can be shorter. And then over the course of time, as people engage with the change and it starts to actually become real, and they actually take action and they start to do things differently, they climb back up that emotional ladder, and they start to get more comfortable and more positive. And then ultimately they wind up even where they were before, and they balance out. And that I've seen that happen over the course of time. I think what is interesting when you're talking about changes in an organization, in a hierarchical company, like I would assume many of us work for, is typically when there's a change, there will be a conversation that starts in the boardroom by the executives saying, okay, we need to pivot, we need to make this change. And even though they're driving the change, they're the catalyst of the change, they're going through that exact same process where they have to process the change that they are putting into place. And then the way that communication flows, that's followed by leadership, and the executives bring in more of the leaders to help, and make that change happen. And they go through that exact same curve where, they're frustrated and trying to figure this out. And then ultimately, as they get closer and further along, they start to climb back up, and it feels positive. And then, of course, when we roll it out broadly, the organization goes through that process. But here's the thing that you need to keep in mind. When the organization starts to go down that down slope and they deal with that frustration and all the things that can go wrong, and this isn't how we got here, this isn't how, this is different. Have you thought through all this? The executives, they're back up at the top.
They've already moved. They've gone through the process and they've moved on.
The leadership team is moving up the top, like they're going up the top of the roller coaster. So what that creates is it creates this gap where all of a sudden the people that are, learning about this change are going, Chris, our leadership team doesn't know what they're doing. I mean, if you talk to these people, they're all positive. No one's talking about all the stuff that's going to go wrong. And it just creates this gap in trust. And I think that's the first thing I would say when it comes to managing change, is that you have got to understand that there's going to be this trust gap, and navigating that. I mean, that's the difference between success and failure.
And you're right. It's and not only just accepting it, it's expecting, particularly as a leader, it's expecting that process and being prepared to manage through it, which really means giving your people room to have the emotion, giving them the opportunity to speak, etc. Right? So as you think about the changing landscape, and I mentioned AI, and it's so easy to focus on AI, but when you think about the changing landscape, what are the things that you think, or what are the things that are rising to the top from your perspective in terms of the effect or the influence or impact on us in this profession?
Well, this is a paradigm shift, and I think it's the biggest thing that everyone's aware of right now. Is just like the other paradigm shifts that we've gone through. It's going to affect our market. It's going to affect the landscape, and it's going to affect the ecosystem that we sell and implement solutions into. And we've AI is it's such a big trend. I mean, first of all, let me just say I'm biased. I studied AI as part of my undergrad. I've been waiting for this, super excited about it. So I don't want to come off as negative, but this paradigm change, it's similar to what we've seen before. We went through this with cloud computing. We went through a paradigm change with mobile computing, right? We went through a paradigm change that I would argue extended beyond our business lives into our personal lives with social media. So we've seen this before. And some of the things, that the way that it's going to impact us is, we're now going into environments where all of a sudden we're being asked questions about, AI. We're expected to be experts in AI. If we're being good partners, good vendors with the companies that we do business with, they're looking to us for thought leadership. I was at the Gartner conference this past October, and you're going to be amazed by this. But as I'm walking through the expo and the Gartner conference, every company's an AI company all of a sudden. I'm like, I didn't know they were AI. Everyone's AI. So, I think through all of us, even if we work for an organization that is not really in the AI business, even though I think we all are, the expectations around like how our solutions fit into AI and how AI is impacting just the day-to-day conversations in our market and where the money's going, it's impacting us in a lot of different ways, just like we've seen with these prior technology shifts.
Yeah, indeed. Ryan, let me pause just for a moment to say hello to a couple more people. Kayuri Yagnik says hello. Kayuri, always nice to hear from you. Sharon is with us. Michael Forbes, what goes into a good AI strategy? Now, I'm going to cue that up as a question. Do you want to address that briefly, Ryan, or should we put that on a shelf just for a moment?
You don't want to pin that one. I mean, I don't want to come across as an AI expert. I said I had an affinity for it, but I think I don't want to try to inform anyone on their AI strategy. What I will say is that I think as leaders, what we need to do is we need to have a strategy for how we're going to be successful in the world of AI, which we're very quickly moving into. And I think we need to be aware of how AI is going to impact our partners, our customers, and our employees as we plan for where we want to be and how we're going to get there.
And to that end, as you were sharing a moment ago, just dealing with, and I love the analogy that you've shared, right? You touched on the paradigm shift with cloud computing, the paradigm shift with social media, right? As just two examples. One of the words that came to mind for me is fear. I think fear tends to become very prevalent, and I've seen a lot of fear, particularly in response to AI. Is that something that you have seen within some of your teams? And if so, as a manager, how are you addressing that, or how are you advising your managers to deal with some of the fear that may be out there?
Well, I think you're 100% correct. Every time that we see disruption or change, fear is absolutely a response, and I think it's one of the first drivers. And I talked about the curve before. I think it's one of the first drivers that pushes people over that first hump and kind of drives them down into that uncomfortable period of frustration. And the answer I would give is, I think the most important tool that all leaders have to have in the toolbox is empathy. And a lot of times when I am either mentoring people that are early in their career and they are interested in getting into leadership, or interviewing a leader that's looking, or interviewing someone that's looking for a leadership role, that's one of the first things, one of the things that I focus in on and really try to get an understanding. Is this a person who can be empathetic? Is this an empathetic listener? Does this person have EQ? Because at the end of the day, I can coach you, Chris, and say, you know what, Chris, I'm getting some feedback, and I think the way that you're directing people, you're kind of using the same tool set. I think you would benefit from taking a situational leadership class. When it comes to management tools, there are things that I can give you as you develop. It's not as easy to say to someone, I don't think you're a very empathetic person. You don't lead with empathy. Here's the solution to that. That's a tough one. I know there are places that say, we can help you be more empathetic. We can offer you, self-development, but it's a little bit different than just giving someone a management tool to help fill a gap.
Yeah.
So it's very important.
What do you think it does take to develop? If you observe someone that maybe is not operating with the level of empathy that you think they might benefit from, how does one develop that?
It's a tough one, and I think the answer is, it starts with having a desire. You as an individual really have to be self-aware, and you have to understand the importance of needing to put yourself in someone else's shoes in order to communicate them, in order to understand where they're coming from. I think it starts with just an understanding. Are you willing to accept the fact that somebody may not have the same values as you? And can you lead that person? Or are you just going to get frustrated? So, I think it's really, it's a journey that people need to take. And by the way, I'm not perfect. I'm on that journey. I'm always trying to get better at it. But I think it starts with a desire and feeling a need to do that. And it's really something that people have to make it a point, make it an effort to develop themselves.
Yeah. I think at some point, ideally, all of us reach a level of awareness that it's not about me, right? I mean, to me, that is the one of the cornerstones of empathy is, look, it's not about me, it's about you. And I'm trying to understand you and help you for your benefit, not just for my benefit. Right. So that resonates with me a great deal. Again, just addressing some of the comments and questions. Mike McDowell, nice to hear from you. I'm not going to read the whole thing out loud, but what I see is Mike is making a comment about demo automation and that being just the first wave and the more dynamic capabilities of AI. Do you mind taking a minute, Ryan, just talking about what is your experience and or your team's experience with using some of the new automation that's that's specifically designed for people in our role? How are you leveraging it? And what do you think about some of these newer technologies?
Well, we do take advantage of some demo automation tools, and specifically helping us to get away from having to do things like harbor cruise demos and things that most solution engineers would just love to avoid. We want to dig into problems. We want to learn about our customers' business and really speak to solutions as opposed to, here's everything we have to offer. Do you like it? And start the conversation. So for me, I know the demo automation space is huge, and it can do much more than I'm describing right now. But that's really where we've found a lot of benefit. And I think, as we go forward and AI becomes more prevalent and it becomes available as a piece of the tool set to more of these demo automation technologies, I think we're going to be able to take it even farther.
Yeah.
So we're interested to see where it goes.
Yeah, and I have a very similar perspective. I mean, you mentioned that you use it you mentioned the Harbor Tour demo. I like the idea of maybe an introductory type demo, right? There are certain things that we should be automating and not spending our precious time on. Where it goes is hard to say. I always liken it. The analogy I always use is the automatic nail gun, right? I'm sure when the nail gun was first developed and put on the market, there were probably a lot of carpenters that panicked a little bit because they thought, well, this is going to replace my job. When in fact, you still need to know how to build houses, right? So the automatic nail gun just made carpenters more efficient, more effective, and more skilled at their craft. So that's probably an oversimplification, but that's my perspective. By the way, Kayuri says being curious and open-minded helps build empathy, and desire is authentic, 100%. And Shannon just chimed in as well. Ryan, you mentioned empathy as one of the most important tools, if I can use that term. I always love things in threes. So if I were to say, what do you think are the most important characteristics or tools of a manager helping their team navigate their way through change, whether it's an internal change, as you mentioned, coming from the executives down, or the external change of a shifting industry like we're all experiencing? What are two other characteristics or tools that you think are critically important for managers to help and leaders to help their team navigate through this change?
Well, in addition to empathy, I think even before you get to empathy and leaning on empathy when you're having conversations, I would say it starts with building a culture of trust. Yeah, as leaders, we are responsible for the environment. I stole that from David Marquet, which I think he put it best. Leaders are responsible for the environment. We are responsible for creating an environment where people can be successful, where people can be open and honest, and give feedback, speak up when we're doing something wrong, raise their hands. And I think establishing a culture of trust where, as a team, we trust each other. As a leader, I can trust my team. They can trust me. That's where it all begins. So I think that's number one. Number two, I talked about empathy. I think when we communicate with empathy, we have to be empathetic. We have to be able to put ourselves in the shoes of our team. We have to be able to envision what they're feeling when we're trying to help them navigate through their, the personal demons that they're encountering as they're working through this change. And number three, I think is open, transparent communication, especially not being afraid to explaining the why. What I see a lot is I see leaders that feel like if Chris, if you're on my team and you're pushing back, you're saying, Ryan, I'm worried. I think this direction that we're going in, we're not seeing the obstacles that are ahead of us. We need to tap the brakes. We need to slow down. I see, from time to time, I'll see leaders that say, well, Chris, I'm the leader here. I'm the boss. Like, I don't need to explain why we're doing this. This is our direction. I just need you to fall in line and do. And because we feel like if I have to explain it to you, in some way that diminishes my authority. Like if I got to explain to my people why we're doing what we're doing, that must mean I'm a subpar leader. I must not be doing the right things. Because if I were a great leader, everybody would just blindly say, "Yep, Ryan's got it. Whatever he says goes. He's never made a mistake in his life. Let's go forward." And I think it's a huge pitfall because I think you can't explain why enough. If you explain the why, number one, it shows that you're vulnerable, and which I think is a great thing. And I think we cannot be afraid to be vulnerable as leaders. Number two, it goes back to number one, and it creates this culture where I'm in an environment where I'm allowed to ask why. What does that mean? Well, it means that I'm in an environment where I can take risks. It means I'm in an environment where I can be innovative. It means I'm in an environment where I can speak my mind. And that's that environment fosters a stronger team culture. So if I had to pick three, I would say starts with the foundation of a culture of trust. Empathy is the most important tool we need to have as leaders. And number three, open and transparent communication, especially when it comes to explaining why.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think part of that too is making sure that you as a leader fully understand the why. And I think one of the biggest challenges, and I love the analogy or the mental image that you gave us very, very early on when you said, when people are faced with change, there's sort of this maybe initial excitement, and then there's sort of this falling off the cliff a little bit because now we start realizing all the things that this means, and then it's a slow journey back up. If we ourselves as managers aren't taking that trip and getting on board and fully understanding the why, it's virtually impossible for us to really carry the flag, if I can use that term, right? And represent the company in the best interest of the company to our people. And to me, that's one of the biggest challenges. I think that's one of the biggest challenges of management.
And so being able to take that journey and really, put on the shoes of your people, it can be tough. It can be very difficult. And but I agree with you 100%. If we can't see the world through their eyes, there's no way that we're going to be able to help guide them and set the vision.
Amen. Ryan, let me push pause just for a moment, folks. I'm speaking to Ryan Lavallee. He is a VP of Solution Engineering with Salesforce, responsible for manufacturing, automobile industry, and energy. Did I get that right?
You did get that right.
Without having to look at my notes. That means I'm doing okay today. We are talking about navigating our way through change as both a leader, a manager, both internal change and just the paradigm shift that we are all experiencing, particularly with the AI and the new technologies evolving. But by the way, Shannon mentioned, if people feel that they are part of the decision, you will gain champions. That's well said, Shannon. Just a moment ago, Ryan, you shared some of the three keys to helping your team as a leader, to helping your team navigate the change: empathy, building a culture of trust, demonstrating empathy, and then transparent communication, particularly by providing the why. Let's now, for a moment, talk more to the individual contributors out there. What are some things that you might say to some of the individual contributors out there who maybe are still they're still down here, sort of in the trough of uncertainty, if I can use that term? I just made that up, by the way. So, but it seems to work just for the moment. But they're sort of in this trough of uncertainty around just the changing paradigm in our profession. What are some of the things that maybe you've even said to some of the people within your organization?
Well, I think the best thing that you can be is just be self-aware and know that the feelings that you're feeling are perfectly natural and are actually being driven not only by your logical understanding of the change, but this goes back to just the emotional reaction that we have human beings have to change, even if it's a good thing, even if it's something that, boy, I hope this changes, I hope this goes away, or I hope this happens. Your natural instinct is going to be to go through this cycle. And I think being self-aware, like knowing this, listening to this LinkedIn Live will help you. Knowing that this is where you are and you're feeling these emotions, and that these emotions are going to pass. You're going to process it. So I would say to anyone who is, an individual contributor who's, on the bus navigating through one of these changes, the first thing I would say is understand you need to give yourself time to emotionally process what's going on. And if you're in a position where you need to make a decision, or you feel compelled to make a decision, like this is bad, I got to get off, not a good idea. I'm not telling you what to do, but I am saying that keep in mind that you're going through a bit of a dip. It's natural. It's going to pass depending on your situation. Be aware, you may want to hold off on making that decision. You may want to step away and take time away so that you can, depending on how you process things, if you process things in a better environment, you may want to move to that environment. We have people that, in order to process change, they got to be in a quiet place by themselves. Maybe you do that. I know other people that they have to be around other people, and they got to be able to talk about it. If you are self-aware and that's how you are and that's how you work through problems, put yourself in that environment, and that's going to help you move through that curve faster.
Well, and to your point about empathy as leaders, I think it's important for us to recognize as leaders, to that very end, some of your people or some of our people, they may need more quiet time or alone, like introspective time to deal with the change. Others will want to talk about it and be in almost like, group therapy, right? And so I think having that's an element of empathy is demonstrating and understanding that people will deal with things differently. And by the way, I always just like calling out. So Eric Garlap is with us. Eric, nice to see you. Self-awareness is a huge part of the EQ mindset. Carrie mentioned, just like sales and SEs should have empathy for prospects and customers, leaders need to have the same empathetic approach. And yes, Jason mentioned a similar conversation to what we had with Sherry Mazza not too long ago. Ryan, there's another thought that came to mind as you were speaking. And by the way, folks, love the comments. Please continue to fire away. And if you have any questions, by all means, particularly for Ryan, by all means, please feel free to ask. One of the things that I think I struggled with the most when I was an SE leader, and to be fair, I wasn't an SE leader for a long time. I was an SE. Then I was an SE leader, and then I decided, not entirely unlike you, I wanted the big bucks, so I picked up the bag and I was an account executive for a number of years before I realized that coaching and training is my passion. The thing that I struggled with the most as a leader is when either I was still maybe down in the trough of uncertainty myself, and yet I now had to speak with my team and speak in a positive manner, when yet I still maybe was dealing with some fear, uncertainty, and doubt. How have you experienced that yourself, and how have you learned to manage sort of those mixed emotions?
That is a tough. So yes, 100%. I have definitely been there. I think we've all been there. And when I think everyone can relate to a situation, especially where there's a change or the decision made. Maybe there's even a decision that's been made by your superiors or by your peer group that you disagreed with. Like, you went in thinking we got to go left, and you walk out of the room, you got to go right. And I think what I'm about to say, this is one key I would say to anyone who's in pre-sales at any level. Partnership is such a big part of what we do. And I think when it comes to, disagreements either as a leadership team, partnering with a sales leader, or as a solution engineer, partnering with an account executive, you go in the room, you close the door, you hash it out. And sometimes you're going to win, sometimes you're going to lose. But whatever the decision is coming out of that door, you come out saying, this is our decision. And this is what we are doing. This is the direction we're going in. That's leadership. And I feel like when you're in a situation and you find yourself at the bottom of that trough, and what you're about to say is probably going to push everybody on the team into the roller coaster. I think you have to ground yourself, and you just have to remember that this is your role. This is why you're here. And the only chance, and you're here for your team, and the only shot that you've got to navigate them through the dip is if you push through and you're 100% behind it. Because if they sense that there's doubt, all you're doing is throwing gasoline on the fire. Yeah. The second that you say, hey, I'm not crazy about it either, but this is what we're doing. Now, what have you done? You've just gone past, you've started to chip away at that foundation of trust, because now they're going, how can I trust you if you're leading us down a path that you don't even believe in?
Right. Well, and I love what you said about you go into a closed room, you have the discussion, you have the debates, however you want to phrase it. And then when a decision is made, everyone walks out of that room carrying the flag, carrying the banner. And to me, this is where we buy into the sort of the greater purpose or a higher purpose, right? At the end of the day, even though I may have had a certain opinion that may have been in a different direction, what's more important is the company and the unity and the unified message. And to me, that's where we find the ability to deliver that message. Would you agree with that approach?
I think that's so well said. And at the end of the day, as leaders, like how do we get our teams to be at their best, to deliver the best work of their lives? And the key to that is we need to make sure everyone is convinced beyond a shadow of a doubt that they are part of a cause, part of a motion, part of a team, part of an organization, however you want to define it, that is greater than themselves. And that starts with us saying that, my role needs to be greater than the way I'm feeling right now. And that's where I have to operate. So I agree with what you say 100%.
And the word that comes to mind for me is and I think this is sort of alluded to, Eric said EQ mindset. There's a certain professional maturity that has to take place and emotional maturity that has to take place, right? In order to be able to do that. I mean, that's really what we're talking about here.
Sure. It's emotional maturity. And like any other skill that we hone as we go through our career journey, our craft, it gets better with repetition. And I think that's one of the important things when you're mentoring or you're developing someone, understanding just, have they had enough repetitions? Can they handle that? Are they going to be okay in that situation? And you're putting anyone in over their head. But yeah, I think it's something that's definitely requires a lot of maturity, and that comes with time.
Well, and at the end of the day, and it's interesting. I obviously, as you likely know, I mean, I work with a lot of sales engineering teams, many of whom have members that came from a tech and an engineering perspective that they don't think of themselves as sales professionals. They don't like the idea of thinking of themselves as sales professionals, right? And I tell them, look, if you can't come to peace with the fact that you're in sales, this is not the right profession for you, right? In similar notion, if you're a manager, but you can't come to peace with the fact that there are times that you're going to have to speak on behalf of the company, whether you are completely and totally bought into the idea or not, that is your role. And if you can't develop that muscle, as you're saying, it happens over time. Maybe management or leadership isn't the right path for you. That's what's going through my mind. This is one of the difficult parts of this job, but it is a part of the job.
It is part of the job. And I think what you said, Chris, is so important, especially when we're working with people that are looking to make that leap into leadership, because I think the allure of having authority is so appealing to people. And I think it's a natural human thing. I'm not picking on anybody.
100%.
I think, I want to be at the head of the ship. I want that job. I want my boss's job. I think it's so important that we spend the time to draw out, what is it about leadership that interests you? Why do you want to do this? And so many times if I get an answer like, well, next step in my career looks good and make more money, and I'd love to be able to just decide what we're doing instead of being told what to do. Doesn't that sound good? My immediate reaction to that is, okay, when you're a leader, there's a lot that comes with it. There's a lot of baggage, and those conversations that you just talked about is probably one of the big ones at the top of the list. You're going to have to learn to give a lot of bad news. You're going to have to learn to represent decisions that you may have not had a role in or maybe even disagree with, but that's what you need to do. And if your passion is developing people and building teams, at the end of the day, you're going to say, not my favorite thing to do, but it's the cost of doing business.
Yeah.
If you do not have a passion for doing those things and you're just doing this because you want to make a little bit more money or have, the ability to make decisions or do things that you can't do today, those are going to pile up like massive, massive weights, and they're going to crush it, and you're just going to be miserable.
Yeah. The words that came to mind for me, Ryan, as you were speaking, there are two things. Number one, the ability to make unpopular decisions and announce unpopular decisions or changes. And number two, the ability to get behind decisions, corporate decisions that you may or may not fully agree with, but to your point, you've had the closed door room, you've said your piece, the team as a whole has made a decision, and now we walk out of here a united front. To me, those are arguably two of the most important things to be able to do to be not just a successful leader, but a satisfied leader in the role. Would you agree with that perspective?
I would agree 100%. And if you're not a satisfied leader, if you're not a fulfilled leader, you can't fake it. It's going to come out, and you're just not going to be successful in role.
Such a good conversation. Ryan, again, let me just push pause one last time. Folks, I'm speaking to Ryan Lavallee. Did I get it right?
Lavallee. You got it right.
He is a VP with Solutions Engineering at Salesforce. He is responsible, and his team is responsible for the manufacturing, automobile or automotive and energy sectors. We're talking about managing change, working with our teams and dealing with change. Just a few comments, Ryan, that I haven't drawn attention to. Eric Garlop again says servant leadership. Couldn't agree more. Steve Bullington. I don't know do you know Steve?
I do know Steve.
Okay, Steve. So nice to see your name pop up. Repetition is the pathway of mastery. Eric made a mention about this whole idea of getting behind something that you disagree with. I mean, look, at the end of the day. Now, Sharon said something about the frontline managers. Her point is never underestimate the role of a frontline manager or the frontline leader plays in change management. Couldn't agree more. And she said, frontline managers run the company. Ryan, let's talk for a minute and Sharon, thank you for that comment. Let's talk about frontline managers, because I agree with Sharon in not only do I think that they're arguably one of the most critical roles in terms of really managing what I'll call the field, right? And taking the decisions that are made in the boardroom and implementing them. I also think it's the hardest step to go from IC to frontline manager. Talk a little bit about when you think of the frontline manager and either some of the challenges there, some of the keys to success. What comes to mind for you?
I mean, so agree with the comment 100%. I mean, our frontline managers, I mean, that is the lifeblood of our leadership team. And, at the end of the day, it's the individual contributors that are at the tip of the spear, working with customers, working with partners. Their collective success or failure falls in the hands of frontline leaders. Mm. And, we talked about it before, that transition from individual contributor to leadership is a tough one. And we have to make absolutely sure that the people that are on that path and on that journey are in it for the right reasons. Mm-hmm. I am a big believer that pushing the decision-making authority down to where the actions take place is what we all need to do as leaders. And I think I'm stealing a lot of this from a lot of great authors that have written some fantastic leadership books. We should start a book club. I'll share them all with you later. But Captain David Marquet, who was a retired Navy submarine commander, wrote that in his book, Turn the Ship Around, about how you need to push decision-making authority down to where the action happens. And I think empowering frontline managers is so incredibly important because they're there. They're working with the people that are working with our customers, that are making things happen. They understand, they see things. And, it's so important to get the vision, the strategic vision, communicated to them in a way that they're really the ones that need to translate that into the work that's being done.
Yeah, yeah. So what I hear you saying, and I absolutely love this, is it's not only critical for frontline managers in order to see the decisions that are made actually implemented in the field, but they actually need to be involved in the decision making to begin with, because they're the ones who are seeing firsthand what's happening in the field, what's going, and how might things affect the employees, the customers, the process, et cetera. So it's not just a one-way street. It needs to be a two-way street is really what I hear you saying.
It absolutely needs to be a two-way street. I think we need to push the decision-making down as far as we can. That is appropriate. I mean, we have to, sometimes we have to make decisions at a higher level for a multitude of reasons. But for those situations, I think we need to be able to push decision-making as low as we can. And for those decisions that need to be made higher up, there needs to be a feedback loop. And I think it all plays together. Like, I need to be part of an organization where, as a leader, I feel like I can give my superiors feedback. They know that even if I give them feedback that is different from the direction that I'm being given, I'm going to step up. And like we talked about earlier, I'm going to step up and represent the needs of the organization and lead my team as if, this is exactly the way I wanted to do it from the beginning. And I feel like I live in a culture of trust where I can provide that feedback, and, I'm not worried about any repercussions if I express disagreements or on somebody's great idea that's, just going to work out perfectly. I can poke holes in it, and that's okay. I feel safe to do so.
Yeah. Yeah. And you've mentioned the word culture of trust on more than one occasion. And that, again, just the mental image that comes to mind is so powerful, right? It's more than just building trust. It's creating, and you use the word environment, it's creating environment where we can speak openly. We respect the opinions of others. And at the same time, we all need to stay aligned on true north, right? And true north is what's good for the company, what's good for our customers, right? What's good for the team, et cetera. By the way, you mentioned some of the books that you're borrowing from. I have to do a shout out to Steve Bullington. Steve is the one who told me about Steal Like an Artist, and it's about a 3-hour read. But basically, all you're doing is stealing. At the end of the day, there are really no brand new ideas. We all just steal from other authors and sort of merge it into our own, understanding of the world, right? So I think it's fabulous. Ryan, you have been so generous with your time, sir. We are nearing the end of our time together. We've talked a lot. We've talked about empathy, creating a culture of trust. We've talked about transparency and communication. We've talked about frontline managers. As you think about this idea of change management, and helping our teams navigate the changing landscape under our feet, is there anything else that you thought we might touch on, or anything else that you thought you might share that maybe we haven't touched on and might be worth sharing before we wrap things up?
Boy, we've touched on an awful lot. I think there is one more thing I'd love to bring up, and it kind of plays off the book that you just held up, which I thought was great. And that is, I think the one thing that we all need to remember, those of us that are leaders, and by the way, when I say leaders are more than people that just manage other people. We can be leaders regardless of what our job in the organization is. So I'm using leaders as a broad term. When you take on a leadership role, you are signing up to be a lifelong learner. And I think it's so important that as we're developing leaders and we're fostering individual contributors that want to be leaders, we make sure that part of that commitment to leadership is a commitment to being a learner. I remember my very first course that I took after getting into people management. The instructor made us go through an exercise, and if you'll bear with me, I'll share with you. It'll just take a minute. She said, "This is what I want you to do. I mean, I'm not going to ask you to share what you write down, so you can be honest. So take out a piece of paper. On the front of the paper, I want you to write down the name of the leader that you've worked for, who was your favorite person you ever worked for." So everybody writes. And then she said, "I want you to just take a moment and relive what it was like to work for that person, how much you enjoyed coming in every day, how you looked forward to picking up the phone when they called you, how how nice it was to talk about your day at work with your friends or your spouse or your partner. Now flip the paper over and write down the name of the worst boss you ever had." And you can actually feel this cloud in the room where people are going, "Arr," this like sort of under the breath. And she made us go through the same exercise and say, think about how you dreaded picking up the phone when you would get a call from that person. Think about how awful it was when you would wake up on a Monday and go, "Oh, I got to go to work today." Now, do you really think that person woke up every morning and said, "Today I'm going to make everybody miserable"? Probably not. They probably just didn't have the right skill set to effectively manage and lead. And that's why it's so important that you take the time to be here, to go through this part of your learning journey and continue that learning journey forward. Because if you don't have the right skills, if you don't have the right competencies, if you don't know how to do the job, as you continue to get more responsibility, you could become that person. So I would just share that as something that is near and dear to me. And I remember that, how important that is when you're taking on the mantle of leadership.
I just, first of all, thank you for sharing the story. And I love the story. And here's my interpretation, is that no one attempts or no one is intentionally a poor manager. No one is intentionally doing things that aggravate, upset, annoy, frustrate people. And those who do, it's not that they have the wrong intent. They just don't have the right skill set or mindset. And so in order to be an effective manager or leader, and again, to your point, leader doesn't necessarily mean leading people, but in order to do so, you really need to have the right mindset and the right skill set and your heart in the right place. Otherwise, there's no chance that you're going to succeed in what you're trying to do. And in fact, you may be operating blindly, not knowing that you're creating. We talked about a culture of trust, not knowing that maybe you're creating a culture of distrust or a culture of dysfunction. That's my takeaway from what you just said there.
I think it's so true. Intent, and you used the word that I should have absolutely thrown in there. Intent is tremendously important, and like we were talking about earlier, one of the things that I asked candidates that want to get into leadership, why do you want to do this? And right. It starts with intent, and does your intent to lead people align with your values and what's important to you?
Yeah. Well, and hearing you even say that question or ask that question, what's going through my mind is, what's the best answer, or what? And there's no one best answer, but a very, very good answer to that might be something like, I believe that our people in the field, our quote, people on the ground, they deserve effective leaders that can understand, create culture of trust, and give them a voice, and effectively balance the decisions of the organization with their needs. So something to that effect. To me, that's sort of the ideal answer. Does that click for you, Ryan?
Don't give everybody the right answer, because then every time I interview somebody from now on, they're going to say, "Well,
listen to this and say what I said."
If they're doing, I love it when people answer that question. And I know I keep hitting values, and I don't mean to, but I love it when people answer that question and bring it back to, this is what I am. This role and what my understanding of this role, here's how it aligns to what is important to me and what I want out of a career and what energizes me and why I do what I do. If being a leader satisfies my why, I feel very, very confident. If you've got a different why, or your why is, well, I think being a leader is a a rung in the ladder that's going to get me to my why, but my why doesn't align with what makes a great leader great or what the organization needs. Well, then we've got a mismatch. We've got a problem.
Yeah. And, as I reflect on where you are now in your career, you now have the gift and opportunity of developing leaders and leading leaders into that role. And who knows, maybe that'll be a future conversation. Ryan, I want to thank you so much for joining today. Folks, those of you who have been with us live, thank you so much. Certainly appreciate all the notes. Any final words in closing from you, Ryan?
I would just say gratitude. This has been such a wonderful opportunity. Chris, thanks for having me. And I think this is just such an important topic, and I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to share my thoughts, and love the feedback that we got during the course of the call. It was great.
Yeah, it's been great. And believe me, your insights have been absolutely invaluable. Can't tell you how much I appreciate you giving us a little bit of your time. Ryan, hang around backstage just for a quick minute so we can say a few parting words to the rest of you folks. Thanks so much for tuning in. We're going to be doing another tech sales advice shortly. I don't know when the next one is, so bear with me, but we'll have one here in the next couple of weeks. If you're catching the recording, thank you so much for listening to the recording. You can like and follow the page, Tech Sales Advice. And of course, you can always go to techsalesmastery.com to learn more about what I do. Ryan, thank you so much for being here, sir.
Thank you, Chris.
All right. Bye all.